thank you for joining us today for Resilient Housing Across the Americas. I'm Monica Schroeder. I'm Build Change's Director of Global Advocacy, and I'm here with Cerin Kizhakkethottam. I think I messed that up, but she'll correct me in a moment, from UN Habitat, and I'm thrilled to have her today here for this conversation. So, Cerin, I wanted to start out just by asking a bit about some of UN Habitat's initiatives and priorities, especially around housing. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for having me. And it's a great opportunity to also share knowledge, receive a lot of knowledge, and being part of that web series is really cool. UN Habitat had recently had its second session of the UN Habitat Assembly, where we have have approved two very major resolutions for the housing and climate resilience sector. One is I want to read it out correctly, affordable housing for all. And then the other one is enhancing the interlinkage between urbanization and climate change resilience. And both of them are actually going quite hand in hand. So the affordable housing for all, that looks actually at promoting or recalling that we actually have a housing right. In the University Declaration 1948, it's been promoted as a human right. But since then, it has been not well taken up as a human right. So it's recalling that it actually is adequate housing is a human right. So UN Habitat has been given a re-established mandate by the member states to really refocus on that housing and resilience sector again. And I found that really encouraging in the times where we have a housing deficit of 1.6 billion inadequate housing for 1.6 billion people. And I have to say that renewed human right for adequate housing gives us also a kind of a direction for a mandate to create a platform. And that platform looks currently at collecting, consolidating, compiling housing data so that we have actually enough evidence and information to understand the gaps and actually enough evidence and information to do responsive action to what is actually needed. Because I think when we consider housing as like a crisis, it always sounds like it just happened a few years ago. Yeah. But if you look into the history, it's actually a systemic failure over the past 30 years. So not recognizing urbanization trends, not recognizing demands, not recognizing maybe also the way demographics change, that we move from houses with a lot of people in them to houses in the majority with only 2 people in them. So there's a lot that has changed in the past, which is of course difficult to always adapt into like housing policies swiftly, and not all legal means are as flexible to react to such urbanization housing trends. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to kind of pick up that mandate within UN Habitat and kind of transform it then into like the new reality that we just have to face. And so that just made one know that, yeah.
That's so interesting. And I think something that, Latin America in particular is advanced in, I think, compared to the rest of the world, is that in so many of the countries in Latin America, adequate or decent housing is recognized as a constitutional right, which is missing from a lot of the legal frameworks of a lot of the other countries, especially, the countries where we're working. And so I think that that's an important mandate to bring up and to elevate to a global level. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So with this global mandate that you have, how do you balance some of the priorities of localization, of inclusion of vulnerable populations alongside this global advocacy agenda, this global implementation need?
Yeah, it's super difficult because, yes, there are so many crises at the same time and you want to respond to all of them while you have really limited resources or, capacities and so on. But on the other side, because those crises are actually interconnected and they kind of all cross through cities, you need to go with a systemic approach for multiple crises. So in terms of prioritization, I think it is a matter of combining different issues and finding solutions as a systemic for multiple reasons or for multiple causes. So if I think, for example, of the housing deficit, but then also on the other side, IPCC mentioned in their last report, the Working Group 2 report, under the 6th assessment cycle, that we have 3.3 to 3.6 billion people highly vulnerable to climate change. And then we have, based on different data, 1 billion people living in informal settlements. So if I overlap those different vulnerabilities, you quickly realize that, hold on, actually where I need to prioritize any action is where the vulnerabilities are the highest. Is it housing vulnerabilities, is it climate vulnerabilities, or any other social crisis or urban pressure issues that are causing certain vulnerabilities? And if that is my focus, then the reprioritization helps, or it kind of like redirects where we can focus our limited capacity or limited resources. And one of the flagship programs that UN Habitat raised under that kind of module is RISEUP, that's Resilient Settlements for the Urban Poor. And it's basically an effort to redirect large-scale investment where the vulnerability is the highest. So for RISEUP, for example, we've been able to have established over the last 5 years a portfolio of 110 million US dollar from different vertical funds. And with those 110 million US dollar for projects globally, we're focusing always interventions based on vulnerability, multi-layered vulnerability assessments. So we understand then where are hotspots of vulnerabilities, because there are multi-layered vulnerabilities of climate, of housing, of urban issues, but also biodiversity degradation. And that gives me an idea where I can prioritize actually my efforts. And so it gives an idea where I can prioritize interventions. And hopefully, starting with the ones that are most vulnerable helps all the cities to become actually a social, more stable place for all. Something that starts from the bottom to be stabilized and then safe. And when I listen here to the titles, also climate change and social crises, and I asked, like, what are your social crises, especially in the region? And a lot of it has to do with like violence and conflict and the feeling of that the social contract between citizens and governments is kind of broken. There's a bit of a trust that is broken, and we don't know where this trajectory is going to in the future. And I think if you start with the ones that are most vulnerable, and you break that cycle of multi-generational poverty, because you give back where, you know, people have suffered the most, where they have to put their own savings on the lines to be resilient to those climate impacts or other impacts that are faced. If you start with them, I think you can kind of restabilize that trust again. So that's where I think RISEUP is one of those angles or flagships that helps us to prioritize.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And so we're here at the LAC Forum on housing, and I'm curious to know, because your role is global, you know, you're covering all different regions. What are some of the key lessons that you think are applicable from Latin America that can be taken to a global context when we're talking about housing and climate? And in particular, I know you're preparing for COP28. So how is this, discussion, this agenda shaping some of the priorities leading up to that?
Yeah, really good question, because I feel like I'm still digesting all of the things that I've learned here, and it's just been such an amazing conference or forum. There have been so many different things that I really loved hearing about, from policy intervention, seeing the 50 minutes or 30 minutes proximity city concept in life or in practice, where the complex and mix of planning is something that we want for our cities to be more inclusive. Then we've heard of housing subsidy schemes that are linked with mortgage systems where, you can bring in affordability into the whole housing market. There were really nice innovative ideas of how to, for example, reduce the embodied carbon emission in the future infrastructure.
We actually have a report forthcoming on that.
Oh,
yeah,
please share.
I will.
Thank you. And I'm excited about all these ideas. And I think they need to go on scale or to scale. And, taking some of those ideas here and basically finding out where are they applicable most in the other regions that I work. And as you said, I work globally. But my role is to actually connect the different knowledge and the different innovations so that we actually can see what is easy to replicate because you maybe have the same climate vulnerability, or what is contextually easy to scale up because you have an idea that was already used in one or the other way, but now there's a new innovation to it. So I really look forward to kind of use what I've learned here and see where in the portfolio for climate adaptation, resilience or mitigation can we reuse it in a way. But also definitely the network and partnership that is established here is something you can really take into the global level, because here people are also very excited about the initiatives like SURGE, the Sustainable Urban Resilience for the Next Generation initiative has been launched during COP27. And we had, in a time of I think it was 3 or 4 months, we had 180 signatories to that SURGE initiatives. And it just shows you such a demand that we really need to think of solutions multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral and multi-level governance, and can't just do it alone. And people here think alike, and that's just the beauty of it, to connect people that think alike and kind of want to be part of the movement and take that into COP28, hopefully.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Cerin. What a fascinating conversation. I hope we keep it going.
Yes.
And a special thank you to UHPH for being partners in this series. And until next time.